August 25th, 1944, at 5:32 in the morning, Captain Friedrich Keller stood inside a candlelit salt mine in central Germany, watching dust drift slowly through cold air. Wooden crates surrounded him, stacked carefully against stone walls that had existed long before the war and would likely remain after it. Each crate carried no weapons, no maps, no ammunition. Inside them were paintings, sculptures, manuscripts, objects created centuries before Keller was born, now hidden underground to escape destruction from the sky. Above the mine, Allied bombers passed somewhere beyond the clouds. The sound reached the earth as a distant vibration, low and constant, like thunder that refused to end. Keller removed his gloves and pressed his hand against one crate, feeling the grain of the wood. A small chalk mark indicated its contents. An oil painting removed from a museum only weeks earlier. He knew its name, he knew its value, and he knew that by orders already signed, these treasures could be destroyed if retreat became necessary. Keller was 39 years old, a trained art historian before the war. An officer now because the war demanded it. He had seen libraries burn. He had watched churches collapse into ash. And standing in the mine, he understood something with painful clarity. Armies could rebuild bridges and factories, but once art vanished, it vanished forever. A courier entered, boots echoing sharply against stone. New directives were spreading fast. Cities were falling. Lines were collapsing. Anything that could not be moved was to be denied to the enemy. Keller dismissed the courier with a nod, but the words lingered in his mind. Deny, destroy, prevent, capture. He looked again at the crates. These were not symbols of power. They were evidence of humanity itself. Keller knew that if he followed orders exactly, the mine would become a grave not for soldiers, but for memory. And as the vibration from the bombers faded, replaced by silence, his story began not with defiance, but with a quiet decision that would carry him far beyond obedience and toward a moment history would barely record. Friedrich Keller had grown up surrounded by books, not weapons. His father was a museum archivist, his mother a conservator who repaired damaged paintings with steady hands and patience. Keller learned early that history could be held, not just written. He studied art history at university, specializing in Renaissance works and medieval religious sculpture. His early career involved preservation, cataloging, and restoration work that required restraint rather than ambition. When war came, restraint was no longer valued. Keller was conscripted and later assigned to a unit responsible for cultural assets. Officially, his role was administrative. Unofficially, it placed him in the path of impossible contradictions. The regime spoke loudly about heritage, yet ordered destruction when retreat threatened embarrassment or capture. Art was valuable only when it served power. As Allied bombing intensified, museums were emptied. Paintings were removed from frames, statues wrapped in cloth, archives sealed into crates. Keller oversaw transfers to castles, mines, and remote money. Each move was justified as protection, but Keller knew protection could quickly become erasure. Orders changed often. What was secured one week became expendable the next. He watched officers with no connection to art signed documents that sealed the fate of irreplaceable works. He heard language that reduced centuries to logistics. Keller did not argue openly. He learned instead how to delay, how to relabel, how to request. These were small acts, invisible on paper, but each bought time. The war narrowed options. Trains were scarce. Roads were destroyed. Front lines shifted unpredictably. Keller's unit was instructed to prepare contingency plans. If capture was imminent, assets were to be destroyed to prevent enemy use or display. The logic was clear. The consequences were unbearable. Keller understood he was not neutral. He wore a uniform. He followed orders. But he also understood that art did not belong to governments. It belonged to history. The tension between duty and responsibility pressed harder each day. By the summer of 1944, the situation became critical. Allied forces advanced rapidly. Communication broke down. Regional commanders acted independently. Keller found himself with authority he never sought and decisions no training had prepared him for. The mine where he now stood was one of several repositories under his supervision. Inside it were works that had survived plagues, revolutions, and previous wars. They would not survive fire. As Keller reviewed inventories by lantern light, the line between compliance and resistance thinned. He was no longer simply preserving art from bombs. He was considering whether to disobey orders to save something that could not speak for itself. And as this realization settled, the story moved forward, carrying Keller from careful preservation into a dangerous transformation shaped by risk rather than protocol. The first act of defiance did not look like rebellion. Keller simply delayed. He claimed transport shortages. He cited structural instability. He requested clarification that never came. Each delay allowed more time, and time was the only ally left. As the front drew closer, other officers panicked. Keller remained outwardly calm, inwardly calculating. He began consolidating crates, moving the most significant works deeper into the mine, away from access points. He altered maps. He changed labeling systems. What appeared chaotic to outsiders was intentional confusion. If orders came to destroy, he wanted them slowed by uncertainty, but delay was not enough. Keller knew that eventually someone would notice. He was risking court-martial execution or worse. He wrote no letters explaining himself. He kept no diary. Protection depended on silence. As Allied forces approached, Keller received the order he feared. The directive was brief. If withdrawal became unavoidable, cultural assets were to be rendered unusable. The language avoided emotion. It did not mention fire, explosives, or flooding. It did not need to. Keller stood alone in the mine again, directive folded in his coat. He read it once more, then placed it back in his pocket. Around him were objects created by hands, long turned to dust. He imagined them burning, melting, collapsing into nothing. Something inside him hardened. He contacted local workers and quietly dismissed them. He ordered guards reassigned. He secured entrances under the pretext of safety. Then he waited. When the final withdrawal began, chaos swallowed hierarchy. Orders contradicted each other. Units dissolved. Keller took advantage of the collapse. He sealed the mine and left behind false reports indicating partial destruction. He walked away knowing that if discovered, he would not be forgiven. Weeks later, Allied troops arrived. The mine remained untouched. The crates were intact. No celebration followed. No announcement was made. The art survived quietly, just as it had been hidden. Keller surrendered without resistance. He did not explain himself. In the confusion of war's end, his actions blended into the background. Others would later discover the treasures and record their survival without noting the man who ensured it. His transformation was complete, not in recognition, but in anonymity. He had crossed from officer to protector, from obedience to responsibility, without ever declaring it. And as the war moved toward its conclusion, the consequences of his choice would ripple forward, leading directly into the impossible idea that art, even in war, could be saved not by armies, but by individuals willing to accept silence as a price. By September 1944, the impossible idea no longer felt theoretical. It had shape, weight, and consequences. Friedrich Keller now understood that preserving art was not enough. Preservation required deception. The front lines moved faster than paperwork, and commands issued from collapsing headquarters carried no memory of what they destroyed. To save the treasures, Keller would have to ensure that destruction orders never reached their targets or arrived too late to matter. The mine had become a quiet fortress. Keller controlled access with procedural language and technical justifications. He cited unstable ceilings, ventilation risks, and unexploded ordnance. Each reason sounded plausible. None could be verified quickly. In war, speed decides truth. Keller exploited delay as a weapon. He knew the greatest threat was not bombs, but his own side. Retreating units were instructed to leave nothing of value behind. Engineers prepared demolition charges for bridges, factories, and infrastructure. Cultural sites were not exempt. To some commanders, art was propaganda material or bargaining leverage. To others, it was simply irrelevant. The impossible idea formed clearly. If the mind could be made invisible within the chaos, the art might outlast the war itself. Keller altered records methodically. Inventory lists were divided, crate numbers no longer matched catalogs. Some items were listed as transferred, others as damaged. The goal was not to erase evidence, but to fracture it. Anyone trying to follow the trail would find confusion instead of clarity. He also understood timing. Destruction orders often came late, issued by officers already fleeing. Keller positioned himself as the last responsible authority on site. When demolition teams arrived, he met them with paperwork, signatures, and warnings. Mines were dangerous. Explosives could collapse galleries and kill everyone inside. Why risk lives for crates already listed as compromised? His calm worked better than resistance. Panic seeks speed. Calm introduces doubt. As Allied forces closed in, Keller faced a final decision. If ordered directly to destroy the mine, refusal would mean arrest or execution. Compliance would mean erasure. There was no neutral ground left. The impossible idea required one last step to make the mine appear already dealt with. Keller prepared false damage reports. He staged minor collapses near entrances. He allowed rumors to spread that flooding had ruined several chambers. No photographs were taken. No inspections followed. Retreating units had no time. On the night before final withdrawal, Keller walked through the mine alone. Lantern light revealed rows of silent crates. He did not open them. He did not touch them. He understood that attachment would weaken resolve. This was not about beauty. It was about continuity, about giving the future a chance to choose rather than inherit absence. Above ground, artillery echoed in the distance. The war was moving on without waiting for him. Keller sealed the main entrance and left no guards behind. The mine became just another abandoned site in a collapsing landscape. As he walked away, he carried no proof of what he had done. Only knowledge. And knowledge, unlike documents, could not be burned. The idea was now irreversible. The only question left was whether it would survive contact with reality. As the execution phase began under the eyes of advancing forces, the execution unfolded not as a confrontation, but as silence. Allied troops advanced methodically, securing towns, bridges, and supply routes. Mines were noted, marked, and bypassed, unless intelligence suggested military value. Keller's mine did not. There were no radio signals, no troop movements, no smoke, just sealed stone and old timber. Days passed. Then weeks. Eventually, Allied intelligence officers received fragmented reports about art repositories scattered across the region. Most had been looted, damaged, or destroyed. One report mentioned a mine believed to contain cultural assets. Status unknown. An inspection team was dispatched cautiously. When they breached the entrance, they expected debris. Instead, they found order. Crates stacked with care, labels faded but legible, protective wrappings intact. The silence inside was not emptiness. It was preservation. The discovery did not make headlines. It was logged, cataloged, transferred to specialists. Art historians examined contents with disbelief. Many works had been assumed lost. Some had not been seen for years. Their survival raised questions no one could immediately answer. Keller, now a prisoner of war, was questioned briefly. His rank was low, his role unclear. He did not volunteer explanations. He did not claim responsibility. There was no interrogation focused on art. The war had larger priorities. The drama of execution lay not in explosions avoided, but in destruction that never happened. In an absence so complete it went unnoticed. Keller's success depended on remaining unremarkable, and he achieved exactly that. As the war ended, efforts began to return art to museums and rightful owners where possible. The process was slow, complex, and imperfect. Many works carried scars of displacement. Some origins could not be traced, but they existed. They could be seen, studied, questioned. Keller was released without ceremony. He returned to civilian life quietly. He did not seek his old profession. Records of his actions remain buried under larger narratives of war crimes, trials, and reconstruction. His name appeared nowhere near the recovered artworks. Yet the execution had worked. The impossible idea that art could be saved by making an invisible had survived the most violent phase of the conflict. It had done so not through force, but through restraint, delay, and the refusal to destroy what could not defend itself. As museums reopened and curators unpacked crates long sealed in darkness, few considered the man who had ensured those moments were possible. History moved forward, carrying the results without recording the method. And as time passed, the significance of what had not happened began to matter as much as what had. That understanding would only fully emerge later, when the aftermath forced historians to confront the fragile line between obedience and responsibility. When the war finally ended, the fate of the art treasures hidden deep inside the mine slowly came to light. The crates, preserved against destruction, emerged from darkness into daylight, a silent testament to survival amid chaos. Museums reopened, exhibitions were planned, and the world began to piece together what had almost been lost forever. The survival of these artworks was more than a simple stroke of luck. It reflected the quiet determination of one man who chose preservation over destruction, conscience over orders. Friedrich Keller's actions reminded history that even in war, when violence and power dominate, there remains space for resistance, for protection, for human care. This story challenged assumptions about loyalty and duty. Keller wore a uniform of a regime responsible for immense suffering. Yet his decision was neither political nor heroic in the traditional sense. It was a personal act, rooted in respect for history and culture beyond borders and battles. The historical significance is clear in the midst of total war. Individuals still had the power to influence outcomes by choosing what to save and what to sacrifice. Keller's story stands as an example of how acts of preservation can quietly rewrite the legacy of destruction. More broadly, the survival of art in war zones reminds us how culture embodies the memory of humanity itself. When art disappears, something essential vanishes with it. Keller's choice ensured that future generations could confront history with the evidence of creativity, faith, and identity, rather than only its ruins. Friedrich Keller never sought recognition for what he did. After the war, he lived a modest life. Far from the public eye, there were no medals, no monuments, no official commendations. His story was a whisper in archives, a footnote in the history of a conflict that overshadowed small acts of courage. Yet, the legacy of Keller's decision resonates beyond any formal honor. It is found in the priceless paintings still hanging in galleries, the sculptures still admired in quiet rooms, and the manuscripts still studied by scholars. These treasures survived not by chance, but because a single officer refused to let them be erased. Keller's journey also reveals a human truth. In the darkest times, choices are rarely simple. Duty can conflict with conscience. Obedience can clash with morality. And sometimes, saving a piece of humanity means risking everything else. In telling this story, we remember not only the treasures saved, but the man who understood that history is fragile and its guardians often remain unseen. Keller's silent resistance speaks to the quiet strength found in responsibility and care, even when surrounded by destruction. His example invites reflection on the meaning of legacy. Is it the monuments we build or the memories we preserve? Is it the battles won or the humanity saved? In the end, Keller's story reminds us that history belongs to all, and its preservation is a duty beyond politics and war. This is the history of World War II. Whoever oppresses the innocent is an oppressor. Neither the earth belongs to this oppressor, nor does the sky belong to him. We stand now and forever with the oppressed. Audience questions. Number 1. Imagine risking everything to save priceless art in the middle of a brutal war. What would you have done in Keller's place? Number 2. How powerful is the act of preserving beauty in history when the world is falling apart around you? Number 3. What do Aeschylus' story teach us about the quiet heroes who don't make headlines but change the course of history? This is WW2 Files. See you in the next one.